The United Auto Workers voted 97% to authorize a strike against the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, which is formerly Chrysler, if a deal is not reached between labor and management by September 14th, so we're now just over 2 weeks away. The UAW president, Shawn Fain, has outlined his demands. They include wage hikes of 46%, an end to the tiered wage system that basically pays new hires less than people who have been on the books for a while, reinstating cost of living adjustments, and restoring defined benefit pension plans for new hires, which were actually discontinued by the automakers in 2007. At Stellantis, only 30% of their hourly U.S. workers get those defined benefit pension plans, which basically guarantee what benefits are going to be lasting after you retire in advance. Now, Fain has caused some panic on the part of management, finance, and finance media. Jim Cramer, very, very afraid of this guy, reminds him of the 30s, union leaders, because of his defiant
reminds me of when workers have power.
Right, reminds me of when they actually demanded things. Exactly.
It's not good for the markets.
Not good for the markets, no. And, he has caused a lot of panic because he has postured himself in a very sort of defiant manner from the start of his tenure back in March, and also his opening response to Stellantis' sort of opening proposal. So he got a sort of opening contract offer from management, and it included things he didn't like in there for obvious reasons: ending a moratorium on outsourcing of jobs, more spontaneous rescheduling policies. So basically, the big three automakers could rearrange your shift at the last moment. Extended periods of time that you need to work when you start before you start getting paid time off. So that was a big no. But then most importantly, Stellantis wanted the right to amend terms of the contract without union ratification. And so given the weakness of that opening offer, Shawn Fain, in Fain-esque style, as will be said of him in the future, I think, gave this response on a UAW live stream, which was broadcasted to their YouTube channel.
Tell you what, brothers and sisters, when we get things like this from the company, and they want to sit there and talk about they're not asking for concessions or looking for concessions, everything they're looking for in this document is about concessions. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do with their proposal. I'm going to file it in its proper place, because that's where it belongs, the trash, because that's what it is.
So as you can see, not the most diplomatic response, but I think that was the right response to that opening offer. Stellantis then issued the following letter in response to that video. So that video aired live on YouTube on August 8th. And then Stellantis replied with this letter. The font is very small, but I will read it. I have it over here. I won't read the whole thing. It starts out: "Colleagues, with a month under our belt, I wanted to share some perspective and facts with you about our ongoing negotiations with the UAW. I was incredibly disappointed to see Mr. Fain's online communication earlier this week," meaning throwing the contract in the garbage. "It does not fairly
communication on
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It does not fairly represent what is happening in these negotiations. The theatrics and personal insults will not help us reach an agreement that continues our proud history of providing good wages and benefits to our employees and maintaining Stellantis' ability to be competitive in the market. These negotiations are critical and require cool heads and a focus on reality from everyone involved." So part of the reality has to do with the shift to EVs, which is obviously going to cause some labor disruptions as well as supply chain disruptions, since inherently, the business of making cars is going to be different. But given the record profits that these companies are seeing, given the fact that workers are still not even making back the losses, not from the Reagan era, from 2008, from 2007. They're still behind where they were then. They obviously want all of what I just mentioned earlier. In addition, Fain has also proposed shortening the work week to 32 hours. Don't forget, it was unions that gave workers a weekend, a 5-day work week. So now He's trying to push this to a 4-day work week, 32 hours. And that has been a controversial claim because obviously making cars is not something you can do remotely. You have to be at the site to make the cars. So we will talk about that in a moment. But I wanted to play this video because he gets kind of philosophical here and kind of political here in ways that we don't generally hear from union leaders anymore, which I think is really interesting because he really talks in this clip about value, about human value, and really kind of detaching human value from market value. He doesn't put it exactly that way, but you'll kind of see what I'm saying. This is only 2 minutes, but it's worth listening to.
Right here in our own country, the talking heads have lost their shit every time I talk about the 32-hour work week. But you know what? They and their coworkers were working from home all throughout the pandemic. And I recently read an interesting study by Deloitte that said most workers in the financial industry are either working from home or coming into the office only a couple days a week. And this study found that 66% of those workers would quit their job if their employers made them come to work at the office 5 days a week. And you wonder why that is. Because they found out during that time that all that extra time at home improved their relationships with their children by 70-some%. It improved their relationships with their spouses and partners over 60-some%. With every relationship category in their life, because they were able to work home more and spend more time at home with family and friends, every relationship category they looked at, it improved over 50%. So it turns out people are happier when they spend less time at work, not more. And you know what? I've heard many of these people, the pundits, want to say, yeah, well, these people have an education. Well, UAW family, you know what I say when they say that to me? I call bullshit. Many of our members not only have college educations, but during the pandemic, we were deemed essential. Our members risked their health and safety to keep the lines running during COVID. Some of our members even gave their lives. So now we continue to risk our health and safety, our mental health, our relationships, and all that by being overworked and underpaid. So here's my question to all of you. Isn't our time just as valuable as the time of the white-collar workers? Aren't our families just as important as the families of company executives? Isn't our own health just as valuable as that of the talking heads on television? You know, UAW family, our demands and our fight are about more than just us. They're about the double standards in our society.
Yeah, just really interesting framing there. Isn't our time...
Well, that's a Marxist argument.
Of course. Isn't our time just as valuable as the time of white-collar workers? Now you say, well, how does a corporation determine value? They determine value according to market dynamics and market incentives. And you would say, well, why wouldn't they determine them that way? That's their role. They're a business. Their job is to pay you what you're worth per hour. What he's talking about is actually a lot deeper than that. And it's actually really interesting to see a labor leader talk like that. Say, okay, well, you're going to have to pay us enough so that we can live on 32 hours. That's our market demand. We're making that market demand because we are asserting our human value, which is transcendent of whatever market value you place on an hour's worth of our work. In other words, we're going to add some of our human value to that dollar amount that you think is worthwhile. We have to raise it to you because you know what? We have lives too. And white-collar workers who get paid to sit at home and work on their laptop, first of all, I would argue, I don't know this for a fact, but I would bet everything I have on it, most of those workers are not working hourly. They're on a salary, right? Yeah. And so they're not logging hours. They're not punching the little virtual clock, right, and having every hour that they put in or not put in timed. And a lot of workers who work from home, trust me, I used to work from home. You don't actually put in that many hours. You hang out for most of the day. You wait for a meeting to come and go. You check emails in the morning. You check emails at lunch. You check emails at 5 o'clock. And that's it. You're putting in about half the time that you quote unquote, invoice for if you're invoicing based on the hour. A lot of people are not. A lot of people are on salary anyway. And so he's making the argument here, hey, we need quality of life. We need time with our families. We need time with our kids. We need time with our spouses. We need time to flourish as people, not just as functionaries, right? Not just as machines that build your cars. We're people. We need to be treated that way. And since we are interacting with our place of work, talk about a Marxist argument, right? We need that interaction to provide us fulfillment. And if it can't, then we're not going to make a deal. So, you know, when I see a guy like that, I see that guy has a future as a politician, because that kind of communication is a lot bigger than what's being negotiated.
It's very interesting, this moment, and really we kind of have a theme going on in this show. I mean, it ties to the rent control thing too. I mean,
and our third segment, and
our third segment, we're really in this moment where workers are pushing for their rights harder than they have in decades, and at the same exact moment, the people who have pushed them to such desperation that finally they're standing up and fighting back and rejecting what I would argue is this kind of Reagan nonsense that a lot of working people did swallow for a while. Quite a few of them bought, because the country was still prosperous enough to afford to buy into that, right? To afford to buy into the culture first kind of signaling. I'm an American, right? They got away with that shit for a while, but it's wearing thin now as people lose their houses and see their devastated, formerly prosperous towns. And at the same exact time, these vampires are trying to go further. Like, when you really look at what they're trying to achieve, it is the you will own nothing and be happy society. That's why people invoke it so much. Because if you keep squeezing people like this for every dime and dollar you can get out of them, I mean, clearly that's where that goes. And with permanent capital buying up the housing stock all over the country, what are they trying to achieve? They're trying to achieve a nation of impoverished renters who get by with the bare minimum, who entertain themselves with TV and the internet and social media, and get used to living with less. That's why I've brought this up before. It always reminds me of the line Ming the Merciless has in Flash Gordon, where he talks about what he's going to do to humanity. And Flash Gordon says, well, what are they going to be? He says, well, they won't be quite the humans you remember. They'll be more tractable. It seems like this is the Ming the Merciless economy, right? That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to lower expectations, and they've already done it, lowering expectations to the point that people accept this as normal. And that's already been achieved. That's already been achieved. People already accept things now that if you tried to do this to American workers in 1965, you would have had the pitchforks and the torches out for you. So we've already had the frog in the pot of boiling water effect, where people are used to much, much less than what they used to expect. But it seems like we've hit a moment here where the battle is finally being joined. Finally, the workers are standing up and saying no more. And it's an open question what they will do in response. I think really when you look at a lot of the culture war stuff, and this is something that like our friends at RBN will often point out, and they're right about it, like it is a psyop to keep the working class fighting over nonsense. It absolutely is. Trying to stigmatize and censor any sector of society that represents a threat as bigoted, as racist, as homophobic, to try to create these absolutely abhorrent categories and labels that can't be argued with, and to put them on anyone like Joe Rogan, who questions an establishment narrative. All of this goes back to this program of stripping the working class of its wealth. And finally, you're seeing a certain portion of it fight back.
And they're fighting back against management because they can't fight back politically in terms of taking their case to any sort of government body, because the government bodies are just completely non-responsive. And so you talk about Marxism, it's been brought up a few times. That's what Marx always said. He said the real fight is going to be workers organizing at their place of work. That's it. That's really where the fight is going to come down to. UAW has withheld their endorsement from Joe Biden. They have not endorsed him yet. When Joe Biden got that big string of union endorsements earlier this year, UAW was not on that list. They're still not on that list. They still have not endorsed Joe Biden. And I think that has a lot to do with Shawn Fain and the resolve that he's showing. And he's right, because this does not look like a guy who's ready to blink first. That's why odds makers are saying there's probably going to be a strike on the 14th.
Oh, yeah.
Please clap.